Hello everybody and welcome to a rather belated Sonic Talk. We had a bit of a computer meltdown here in the office and everything went a bit wrong. So it may not hang together. It's just bizarrely the computer where all of our streaming hardware is attached to just refused to recognise any of the equipment. And it was just really, really peculiar. And the only thing we tried loads and loads of things, even booting up, and then the final thing was just switch. It was literally switch everything off and then on again. and that fixed it. It was very. So I want to say thank you for hanging in there. I know it's been a bit of a thankless task. And I am recording. It's all looking good. So yes, sorry about that. And we'll try and generate a little bit of a show for you, although it'll have to be a bit shorter. Obviously, this show is brought to you by iZotope. And we will have a little bit of. In fact, I haven't even got. I'll have to announce the competition winner next week, because we've had such a disastrous technology. I haven't had a chance to find it anyway. So I'm going to say hello. We got Gaz Williams in the house, songsurgeon.co.uk, professional bass player, and all about general man about town. How are you, Gaz?
Man about town. I'm very good. Thank you very much.
I'm glad to hear
it. Yes. So I'm in my studio right now, and I was explaining just before the show that I've been developing different creative zones in my studio. So it's actually quite chaotic at the moment, but there's 4 separate creative zones, and each zone, the operator of it has an equal amount of control over the computer. So it's a sort of, it's trying to see if you can kind of run democratic recording sessions, you know, so just to take the onus off one single person. But I've been creating a template in Cubase that I call in my, you know, I've got various templates I've created that are called creative zones, and the idea basically is that it's pre-configured for this kind of setup. And the idea is once the session begins, you don't need to really do anything to the computer, but you can just keep working and navigating the projects from anybody can do that. And what I've got it going in 2 ways at the moment, where you've got completely autonomous setups as well, where you can kind of mute the monitor mix, do things, turn other people back on, throw what you're just doing back to everyone else.
That sounds even more complicated than the dreadful mess I've been going through the last couple of days.
It's complicated, and I've been wondering why on earth I'm so kind of trying to do it. And it's because I think ultimately working with computers needs to evolve in this kind of direction. You know, we know that in GarageBand on the iPad now there is something a little bit like this, in that you can kind of work on different iPads and collate all the information. But to actually be able to sort of meaningfully kind of and democratically work on something, you know, I think the tools need to sort of develop to make that a possibility. I think this is certainly the case for bands who are not necessarily traditional bands, but bands of electronic instrumentalists. I went to see James Blake play yesterday, and his band is fantastic. It's just a 3-piece band, and James Blake is a fantastic singer. He sings with a very soulful voice, but he's got a drummer who's playing, I think it was like something like an octopad with some acoustic cymbals, and he's got like a kick pedal. And there's another guy who's playing guitar, but he's also got a Moog Taurus pedals, Taurus 2, but he's got it raised up, so he's playing it with his hands. It's quite and James Blake, I think, is playing a Prophet 08 as well. So it's quite a minimal setup, but it's really interesting. These guys are in their sort of early to mid 20s, and they're playing like a real band, but the tone and texture is all, you know, very much influenced by the instruments that they're using. And interestingly, there's no backing track, no click track or anything, and they were doing sort of like live looping, but just doing it so it was just really getting their timing in a kind of very natural way. Quite impressive. So recommend James Blake for anyone.
Nice. That sounds brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was in, and the reason why I mentioned that though is just that I see these new bands who are kind of trying to sort of be more democratic in their approach to electronic music. So I think that developing techniques to record as a kind of, as a bunch of people and not the onus on the one person, I think is the way to go.
That sounds really, really interesting. And I'm kind of, yes, I'm in a sort of multitask overload at the moment. So I'm sorry if I seem slightly distracted. I'm just trying to get a few things lined up that actually will work. But let's say hello to Mark, because Mark Tinley's here as well. Mark Tinley over there, likebeing.com. Also, new hat, new view. Creative thinker and sound artist.
My ridiculous hair. I did a gig at the weekend.
Awesome.
That's my favourite news of the week, with my friend Robin, and we played in an art gallery in East London. And I bumped into my favourite thing that happened this week is I bumped into this man called Mervyn, who said to me when I was introduced to him, he said, "I know you're ready, sir." And I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Yes, you went to a party at Youth's house." And I was like, "Oh God, did I?" And then we had this conversation, and he said, basically, I stumbled into his photographic studio downstairs instead of the party. And I don't remember anything at all apart from trying to kick his door down. So I apologized for that. But then he told me that, he said, "I met Satan at the crossroads and I sold my soul in exchange for control over the time and the weather. And I control all of time that is lost when people are inebriated." And I was like, wow, okay. And then we had this kind of bizarre but deep conversation about time and the weather. And then I played the show, which was great. And he was actually a really lovely man, really lovely. And whatever I did, I asked my brother Adam about it. I said, "Did I go to that party?" And he said, "Yes." And then he said, Bjork and Susie from Susie and the Banshees were there as well, and I was just like, "Oh God, I just don't know what happened." So, yeah, Mervyn probably knows what happened though. He's got that shard of information somewhere, hasn't he?
That sounds. Again, I think Rich is trying to. Here, I did try and ring him, but he wasn't.
Maybe he'll say something sane.
I don't know. We're just going to try and get Rich as well. Sorry about this. It's very disjointed. This disjointed show is brought to you by iZotope. But there will be, and as I said, we'll have to forget about the. I'm just going to try. Just talk amongst yourselves a minute. I'm just going to try and get Rich online as well.
Just talking about James Blake again briefly. Though, is that I think it is interesting, and it is a trend that I've seen only really in the last 2 years of this, very computer-free electronic bands. Well, obviously you saw this pre-computer, but computers have come to dominate so much that seeing.
Oh, totally. I mean, that's what I did on Saturday. I mean, Robin and I could have done that gig so easily with like the whole backing tape thing and just gone for like a really professional, like kind of layered sound and all that sort of stuff. And I said to her, "Let's just do it with like a drum machine." So I've got this old Sony drum machine from the 1980s, which just has the most basic drum sounds in it. And then it was the two of us with electric guitars, and she sang, and it was fabulous. It was such fun. I actually smiled, and I never ever smile with anything to do with music. So I think, I'm pleased that the overall general trend in music is to go back towards musicians. It doesn't matter how good you are, because I'm only saying that to make myself feel better, maybe. But it's not about how good as a musician you are, or how polished or perfect your sound is. It's about like having fun, surely, isn't it? It's about like feeling it and getting into it and all that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Having fun, yeah, I like the sound of that. Not something I'm enjoying much of at the moment. Is Rich Hilton? Are you there?
I'm gonna shut this down and reboot Skype. So I'll be back in 1 minute.
Okay.
So this band called Darkstar, who we first met them in Japan. And they're a great band. They're called Darkstar, and they're on Warp Records. And
I've heard that name. Why have I heard that name?
Well, I mean, it's an old film, isn't it, from the 70s? But then there's been a couple of bands called Darkstar, and there's Grateful Dead track as well, isn't there? But it's this current Darkstar who are like signed to Warp Records. They very much have got this live approach to things, and it goes wrong a little bit live, but it's okay because people kind of realize. Same with James Blake yesterday. He was doing this thing with a loop of his voice, and it was really impressive. And he went wrong in a little place, so every time that little mistake came past, he did a very long loop, maybe a minute long, just singing in freeform, and then every time it came round, he overdubbed onto it, and he had no timing guide at all. He was just kind of nodding when he did it. It's a very brave thing to do. It was yeah, and he built it up into a huge, big, kind of harmonized performance, and it was brilliant. It was really good. But as I said, it was this tiny little mistake where he came in a bit early, and you heard it every time it went round. But I just was looking forward to hearing that little bit every time it came round.
You probably can hear that.
Hey, Rich Hilton. Anyway, hey, Rich. Here's Rich Hilton. He works with Nile Rodgers in the studio, and he's also on tour with Chic. How are you, Rich?
I'm good.
I think you may be a lot better than I am. This has just been a complete nightmare. Maybe today is going to be a slightly aborted effort, and I could only apologise to our listeners for the slight. What basically happened, Rich? In case you hadn't heard, our main streaming machine just died. Literally. 3:05. All right, I'll just get this. And it's like, oh no, I'm not recognising any hardware. What do you mean? I'm not a streaming machine anymore. I'm a toaster. Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's what happened. But now it's all working. So we have Gaz in perfect HD. It's all looking fantastic. It's just not working very well.
Unlike that new Waldorf Pulse thing, I think that looks a bit gay, actually.
Does it? Well, let's have a look then.
Oh.
Why don't we actually start with... Let me have a look.
Hooray!
Let's have a look at that. There might be a Waldorf thing. Let's see if I can actually find one. I did download something.
Now.
Let me see if I can find it. So, hold on. Waldorf Pulse. There must be something here. I've got a link somewhere. I might even actually be able to get it to play.
Oh God, am I on the screen? You've caught me being naughty.
I'm sorry. I will switch that. Oh God! Right. Hold on a minute. Nothing's going to work for me today, is it? I can tell. Waldorf Pulse. I need to search for that because all of my prep was taken up. Unfortunately, in the
pick something else then. It's okay.
well, no, nothing. Everything's equally underprepared. It's really no problem.
Oh, is it?
Why don't we talk about it while you're looking for it? So the Waldorf Pulse, this is the Waldorf Pulse 2, isn't it? Which is following on from the 90s Waldorf Pulse, but it's in a completely different format. The original Pulse was in a rack unit, wasn't it? And then now this one is much more like the Blofeld kind of layout, really, isn't it? With a matrix and a bunch of knobs on there. But it is entirely analog, isn't it? Certainly the oscillators and the filters are. Yeah, and the filters are, I think, aren't they? So, but the thing that caught my eye with it is that it can operate in paraphonic mode, and I was interested or intrigued to know a little bit more about that, if anyone could shed the light. So it can do 4 or 8 voices in paraphonic mode.
Yes, I think looks like I have some sort of a clip here I could play. Let's see if this is actually going to work. Oh yeah, maybe if I plug my laptop in, I might actually be able to. You might be able to hear something. Oh, this just gets better. This gets better and better. I don't know how I've survived this long without doing shows with zero preparation. Here we go. Something's happening.
Could that even be the same? Is that the same chassis?
It looks very much like the Blofeld, doesn't it? It's got 3 analog oscillators, pulse width modulation, hard sync, and filter FM from oscillator 3, ring modulation. Yeah, and this 8 or 4 voice paraphonic mode, which I have absolutely no idea what that is. And that's the thing. Well, no, I do actually. I think what that actually is all the voices go through the same amplitude and the same filter. So basically, you get this single envelope and single amplitude. So it's kind of like what happened on the Volca keys, where you play a note, if you play it really quietly and then you play another note really loudly, the first one grows in volume because the amplitude, the VCA is being turned up, so it's only a single voice effectively. I guess it must be something to do with DSP you know, saving, I suppose, that kind of thing. But it does sound kind of cool. I mean, the Waldorf Pulse. I don't know whether it was necessarily a very classic synth, but I mean, the only thing
it was cool though.
It was cool
for a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, you got to remember about the Pulse was that was sitting there amongst a whole bunch of digital kit, and you saw it in lots of studios, in lots of kind of budget studios as well. So I think that where it's kind of unique place in history, well, certainly for me, when I've encountered them back in the 90s, that they would be quite often people's only analog synths. You know, so I think that, and I think it's pretty cool. It had a decent filter on it.
Yeah, they do sound like, I mean, that's the same as in the Sledge that I reviewed. It's a similar sort of engine, I'd imagine, except more, which had 3 oscillators as well.
Obviously, but that's a digital synth, though, isn't it? I mean, this one is an analog synth, so I guess
same architecture. I saw
the same architecture, structure. Okay, that's interesting. So now, is that the same then? The same shape as the is that the same as the Blofeld then? Because I mean, it's got that matrix form where you can kind of push.
Yeah, it's very similar. I think the actual screen, if I go to this will probably work. If I go to the screen, you can see that it's got quite a large LCD like that. I think the LCD might be a little bit bigger actually than on.
It does look bigger. There's more controls there, I think. Is there?
Yeah, maybe. I think there's only 4 on the on the what's it.
So I mean, the thing about that matrix. I had a Blofeld keyboard for a while, and the thing about that matrix is it is a very fast.
Once you get used to it, it really does. Doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very fast, and you think, well, actually, you can cover a lot of ground very, very quickly with just a few, just a few quick sort of moves. So I think that it is a interesting, because that's obviously designed as a desktop synthesizer, and therefore would, I think, fit with a lot of the way that a lot of people work. You know, I could imagine something like that alongside the Native Instruments machine or a Ableton Push or something, working in that type of.
It's interesting you say that actually, because the Matrix thing does work very well. It was something I reviewed recently, which I found it was the Ultra Nova, Mini Nova, which has a very it's a similar kind of concept as a Matrix, and you find you can whip around it very quickly. It's not as fast as having the real thing, and it was also always thought of as a bit of a sort of poo-poo, to have a Matrix editor. I know, Rich, you've got you've got a Dave Smith. Have you got access to Dave Smith stuff where you are? But the early stuff was all Matrix driven, wasn't it?
We have a Prophet 08 in the studio.
But that's kind of 1-to-1, isn't it? But the Mofa, the early what was it? I'm trying to remember the Evolvers. They had Matrix, and that was kind of you could be quite fast with that as well once you get your head around it.
The Dave Smith Mofo in the little unit though, that was very slow, terrible operating on that one, I think. But that didn't have Matrix. That was just literally pages of 4 knob sort of. You just have to page through it.
Does Waldorf figure very highly in the States in kind of people's instrument collections that you've seen, Rich? It's because a lot of European synths don't make it over there in great numbers, right?
I don't know about European synths in general, but the answer to your first question is no. I know one guy who was into having one, but mostly no. And as regards what I saw in those videos, I have to believe the synth is better than those demos.
Right. Well, that's
because that was not how shall I put this politely? That was not among the more interesting presentations of the capabilities of a synth that I've ever seen.
Especially when you consider it's got 3 voices, 3 oscillators. I mean, you should be able to get a bunch out of it more than a few.
It was just all such boilerplate stuff.
It's funny though that lots of demos do tend to go that way because people want to hear. It's like when I'm reviewing a synth, they have to go through those kind of here are the waves, here's the filter, and then try and dig out some interesting stuff. But you've got to cover those basics, and I suppose you can
cover those basics in the first 7 seconds and then show what it really does. I'm serious. You do. You're right. You have to present those things, and you should, but not for a minute and a half.
Yeah, maybe so.
I just felt like the thing's got to be able to do more interesting stuff than that.
I'm sure it does.
All respect to the guy who undoubtedly did it on a deadline and had no time to prepare and everything else. But It did sound like it's going to make some really cool sounds.
Yeah,
once you teach it.
Well, we've got one ordered for review, and I'm really hoping that we get hold of it soonish. That would be fantastic. Mark, have you got any Waldorf stuff? Have you got any Waldorf stuff in your history?
Waldorf stuff in plugins. I've used Waldorf. I think Adam had that Waldorf thing with the red knob on it, the rack mount thing with the red knob on it, but I can't remember what it's called. I always found, I don't know, all the Waldorf things I've ever used have always presented me with a very clinical, very clean kind of sound, and I like things to get messy. So I like things to get a little bit unstable, and they're very, very stable, very clean, very perfect synths, which is, I think, what makes some of their digital stuff so good, because again, it's very clean, very perfect, very stable. So I've got the Nave thing. Is that what it's called?
Oh yeah, no, I must. I haven't got round to that. I really must. I really must.
I've had
and then
amazing sounds off now.
I've had some of their PPG things, and then the one I coveted forever was the massive, massive keyboard with the red knob on it. But I'm not sure if it was the sound or the look.
Wave.
And
the wave,
waves with sort of Waldorf, they just make their stuff look technically brilliant. And perhaps that's what I like about the look of their machines, and perhaps that's what I don't quite like about the sound of their machines. So I'd have to see it in the flesh and play around with it for a bit and see if it did what I wanted it to do. Yeah. I suppose I could do fuzz box.
That's a fair point. I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable to think.
Can I have a Line 6 rant?
Oh yeah, what if you want?
I bought a Pod X3 a couple of years ago because I'd recorded a whole load of stuff with Duran through a flex tone, and I liked the sound of it. And the Pod X3 says on it, with the classic Pod sound, except it doesn't have that at all, because the Pod 2 range has a completely different flavour of AIR in it. And I only worked this out last week when I bought a Pod 2 and plugged it in and tried to compare the two and get the Pod X3 to do the same as the Pod 2. The Pod 2 just sounds brilliant, and the Pod X3 sounds like a poor engineer with a 57 on a cab, and it's sort of not, it just doesn't have the thump and balls of the Pod 2.
Isn't that just down to the D2As?
No, it's not. It's down to the way they do the guitar cabinet emulation, and
have you heard the new one, so Mark, the Pod HD range, the
500? We've just reviewed the 500X, and
no, I'd have to compare it to a Pod 2 now, because I've actually got back to the sound that I wanted, and the Pod 2 is so fabulously accessible. You can literally switch the amps around and then just grab a few knobs, and then you're in like BB King world, or you're in like Purple Haze, or you're in like Deep Purple, or you can get to the Angus sound or whatever really, really quickly and just jump around those sounds and kind of mold between them and get to the place you want to be. And the X3 is just menus and plodding around in things. And maybe I could write an EQ curve in a plugin that would emulate that thump that I'm getting in the Pod X2. It's probably possible. But
great candidate for the show title there, Rich. Hello is Mr. Thump there.
I can just plug it in. No. So why bother when I can just plug in the Pod 2?
Fair enough. You'll be pleased to know, actually, that I've got the ability to bring the chat room into the mix these days as well, and I can, as a sort of little faded lower third. This is what I'd be working on. You see, Rich, it is worthwhile. I can have a full screen or just a little bit of chat room, sort of minor lower third. So there we go. That would probably be the title. Let me see if I can find that. I can roll that down.
What, the attorneys at law?
Hello, is Mr. Thump there? Yeah, there we go.
Thumping balls, attorneys at law.
But I would love
the first thing
I'd love to try a Line 6, the latest Line 6 pod, the rack one actually. So
well, we've got literally. I've just finished editing today the Pod HD 500X, which has we had Mervyn to play because he loved the 500 so much he bought it. And now he's got this one, and it's got like 20% more DSP. There's not much else going on in there. It's got, I don't think it's got any more sort of algorithms or whatever, at least as far as I can gather. Gosh, I've got Mr. Mannering glasses today. But what it also does is, with the extra DSP, it just seems to have more quality to it. And but they've added these little red rings around the puts, which makes it just more of a kind of useful thing to use live as well. So the hardware's been updated more than perhaps the anything else going on in software, but that's pretty cool. It's just a question of whether or not you dig the Line 6 sound.
Sometimes the key, because the Pod 2, the hardware is the key on the Pod 2, just being able to grab stuff and be able to do stuff.
Right. I'm not familiar with the Pod 2. We Mr. Thump.
Yes, I am ignoring you all in the chat room. And carrying on regardless.
I'm not. Here we go. I'll put them in there. There we go. I'll roll it down, and I won't ignore you because I can now have you back. You'll be pleased to know. And I could also play videos. Assuming I'd actually prepared any for the show, I could press a button and it would play just like this, and it would be awesome. But it's not going to be awesome because I haven't prepared any videos. You'll have to wait to next week for that awesomeness. In fact, you'll also have to wait to next week for our competition. But now I better play our ad because that's one of the reasons that that iZotope do sponsor the show, is so that I can discuss their product. So I'll pray. Here, of course, RX3. This is something that we're looking at. We looked at. You may have seen our in-depth that we did with Matt Hines. Some really great stuff in the new RX3. It's primarily new interface with tabbed interface, multiple undos. You can save RX documents, so you can really kind of forensically change your audio, but then always go back, and that's something that's really important to workflow. Also, there's a de-reverb technology, dialogue denoiser, which runs in the full pro version, but it allows you to run many instances across multiple tracks with very low latency and low DSP. You can work up to 6 times faster with audio intelligent processing and other workflow improvements. Never lose an edit again with the unlimited undo, as I mentioned. Many audio problems you can fix with declip, declick. The declip actually works in both phases now, so you can change the top or the bottom depending on where you think it's best. And also, you can basically get hold of it now. Go to izotope.com/RX and you'll download it. And we did run a competition last week, which was comments for the favourite sections of the shows. And there's some great ones. Actually, a lot of them including you, Gaz. And Mark. I don't think I've had any at all, but one of the ones was particularly to do with your gig butt story, Mark, which I think everybody enjoyed. That's the one where Rich Hilton was just laughing uncontrollably, and we had to basically keep the camera away from him because he was crying so hard. I think I remember that very fondly. But I will announce the winner next week. I'm sorry about it. Because there's some great entries. I just haven't had the opportunity to get anything together apart from actually just get a show on the air this week. So I'm very sorry about that. But I do hope that all this hard work will now result in a much more fabulous show. I've got a new switcher as well because our old one was the buttons were going. So I've now got a Korg. I better switch that. Nano Control 2, which has only got 8 channels, but it's got more buttons. So now I can play more videos and I can do more things. So I've got my 6 shots there, and I'm not using all the controls. So, but I can do some really neat things. And now, at the end of the show, I've got a button that fades to black. Here, watch. Whoa. So I could do a proper ending of the show. Now what I'm doing now, this is where I find out.
Yeah. Can I interject about a few things that I think are worth mentioning about iOS 7 that you may or may not be aware of, or the listeners? One of which I think is really interesting, in that iOS 7 has now enabled the camera connection kit to work on iPhones 5 and upwards. So you can now.
Does that mean it will work on my iPad?
I don't really understand. I mean, doesn't it not work already?
No.
Oh, I see.
No, the camera connection kit's just been an iPad-only thing. So if you wanted to connect an audio interface, or like a USB keyboard or anything like that, you couldn't do it to the iPhone. So it's a biggie, that one. So now,
yeah, I've got an iPad Mini and it's got the same connector, and whatever I plug in, nothing USB worked on it on iOS 6. So that's the first thing I'm going to do after this show. Try that.
Well, that's one of the big ones. The other big one in iOS 7, of course, is the inter-app audio being built in at a operating
but Peter Kern wrote something on Create Digital Music, which was basically don't, because it's not working properly yet.
I mean, right, okay, maybe that's the case, but at the same time, when you see it in action, it's actually quite nice. There's a good video about the integration of Nave and Aurea, and it really does become much more like that idea that it's that things are like plugins running inside of software.
Well, that's a bit more interesting.
Yes, it's so it does bode quite well. I mean, I think the comparative weakness of the processors of things like iPads compared to desktops, etc., is going to mean that this is something that will probably become better or more useful as the machines get more powerful. Like the new iPad, I think, is going to have the same 64-bit processor.
Yeah, well, the iPad, the new iPhone. We haven't really talked much about the new Apple products, but the new iPhone is, it's infinitely more powerful. It's quite interesting, and that makes sense that you could then add peripherals to it, because I mean, otherwise, what are you going to do with it? All that power.
I think you can do, but you can do this retrospectively though as well on older iPhones as well. So
okay, that's interesting.
So I thought I'd just mention those things because it is kind of relevant news.
Yeah, definitely.
And this stuff's only really just emerging now.
Well, there was another part of the story, because this is going to be very freeform. I don't know where we're going to go with this. Obviously that we got Apple sold 9 million iPhones in a weekend, which is really kind of an amazing figure when you consider what's going on in the PC market. It's just like, okay, it puts into perspective where people who are going to be putting their development resources into apps rather than anything for serious content creation or whatever. But it's quite an interesting dynamic, and those sort of figures are really going to start to I mean, because the people that are going to take notice of that are going to be the app developers, presumably. So we're going to start to see presumably even more stuff happening on that platform. It's just such a shame that there's nobody else nipping at the heels at the moment, which is
I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
Based on my travels, Android OS running in particularly Samsung, but other devices as well, seems to be internationally the most, and I think the statistics bear this out, the most widely used platform.
Yeah.
And there are gobs of apps for that stuff. Pretty much everything that's being written for iPhone is also being written for Android. I'm not evangelizing here, and I have my iPhone right here. So I'm not, nor am I endorsing. I'm just saying. I think they're, they're the flavor of the moment because they've just released a new model and sold a gillion of them, and people started lining up like it was a Grateful Dead concert 2 days before.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
But ultimately, I still think they don't have the major market share in mobile phone operating systems, if I understand correctly. Somebody stop me if I'm completely
wrong. I think you are actually right. The problem is the issue with obviously Android is still the horrible latency. It's not designed in the same, or it's not built in at the roots level, which means.
But it's available in lower cost products that are more widely affordable to a large number of people around the world. Now, Apple is trying to crack that with this iPhone 5C, I think, which, if I understand correctly, is considerably less expensive.
Not here.
No, not here.
No?
It's really similar price.
Is the price? Yeah. It's really?
It's a similar. It's a similar
90
price.
Quid, 90 quid cheaper. 469 for the C, 550 or something for the.
Oh, really? I thought it was like by
yes.
half. That's crazy. That I don't understand that marketing wise, but.
No.
Crazy.
I've been waiting for that phone to come out, and the moment it came out, I just went out and bought a second-hand iPhone 4. Because what's the point? There's a level that you need to go to with this stuff, and I don't need all of that unless it's going to be affordable.
Well, the iPhone 5 is actually very nice as compared to the 4 because the screen size is larger, so you're actually affected in the way you use it. It is a lot of
my daughter's friend used hers by dropping it down the toilet the other night when she was at a party. So I just couldn't go there. If I spend 500 quid on a phone and then break it, I'd have to buy another one. I'm not going to do that.
Then you own a Chromebook too.
Well, they are expensive. I mean, any of them. I mean, even my lowly, HTC One X would cost me 300 quid plus to buy a new one, because I'm thinking about this. This is So, but I think the idea is the 5C is supposed to be a more affordable way to get into the iPhone kind of regime, I suppose. But
I want to see what the relative price. The iPhone 5C starts at $100 in America.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with a 24-month contract that you pay a lot more for than we do here, though.
Right. Or $200 for 32 gigs. So it's, what is it, $100 cheaper? It's like two-thirds of the price.
Yeah, that's pretty cheap.
So, but I mean, to get an entry level at $99 does start to crack that Android business model where the reason why people are buying them is because they're so cheap.
Yeah.
Because the 5S, I believe, starts at $199. So what they've done is they've cut their base price by half.
Yeah.
At least here.
Yeah.
Yes, with contracts. Yes.
Yeah. With contracts. I mean, if you want to buy an iPhone here, not linked to a network, it's like 600 quid.
Well, it's the same thing.
700 quid, I think. Yeah.
You buy it without linking it to a provider, you're going to spend a lot of more money.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah, same deal. But anyway, it's just an interesting dynamic, and I think things are going to be changing. Actually, there's something else that's come up, which I think we should cover. This was breaking news yesterday. If I hit my button, then I should be able to show you the web page. There we go. Oh, look, that's what happens if on the site while we're streaming live everywhere. You see, Sonic Talk podcast is streaming live now. Join us. That's been going for half an hour before it actually did. This is the news that Gibson, the news that Gibson were basically, well, they haven't bought Cakewalk. They've announced an intention to acquire, which I'm not entirely sure what that means. As far as I can understand, that means. What that means is, if anyone else was thinking of buying Cakewalk, forget it, because Gibson have already done it, and we want to make sure that we get the price that we offered. It sounds like a bit of crafty finagling to me, but outside of the just business practice aspect of it, it's got to ring a few alarm bells. I mean, we had the guys from Cakewalk here last week showing us a new product, which we will hopefully be able to display on Saturday when they announce it finally, if that's actually what's going to happen. But I'm just thinking opcode. I'm thinking, there have been a couple of other brands that have not made it through the Gibson acquisition process.
Now, this says something about it being branded Tascam as well.
They're going to change it to be. They're going to form something called Tascam Professional Software, apparently, which is kind of interesting because that's what I was thinking. Gigasampler. That's the thing that died as well, and that was Tascam.
Yeah.
Tascam bought that. I don't know if they killed it, and then Gibson bought Tascam.
Very good as well.
I can't remember. Well, I know several people are still using it. It's just a little bit. It's a little bit worrying. But I'm the people I've spoken to who are involved in Cakewalk are pretty excited. So I don't know what this means. I guess.
And I think they should be.
Yeah.
I think they should be because I've met this guy Henry, who's the head of Gibson, and I don't think he's buying this thing to kill it. I think he wants to be in this business, and I think he wants to integrate hardware sales and try to become some version of Steinberg, Motu, whatever, where you're selling a platform and hardware to support it and trying to be whatever the Pro Tools killer or the whatever your favorite PC guys are, killer, Steinberg killer. I think he wants to be in this business.
Well, that's an interesting point, and it does make sense. Echosonic Gigasampler was swamped by Contact Halley and Ale. That's very true, actually. That's also a good point. I think you could be right, because I think maybe when they went with opcode, which was what, 2006, 2007, that might have just.
It was earlier than that.
It was too early, wasn't it? It just maybe it wasn't. People weren't ready for it. In fact,
and I don't think he was the owner of the company at that time.
Well, maybe not. Yeah, maybe that's a different thing.
I think this guy pursues things out of passion.
Oh, well, that's
my
encouraging.
limited experience of this guy, and I've met him, is that he really loves this business. He's excited by certain kinds of products, and he wants to be in it. He's not Gordon Gekko in Wall Street. He's not buying companies to sink them. I don't think so.
So I think it's unfair to tar him with the same brush. Then, yeah, sorry.
He could prove me wrong, but I really don't think that's what this is.
Well, that'd be great. I mean, because I suppose we are thinking if he wasn't around when Opcode and Oberheim were bought, then he can't really be held responsible for the way the company was. But
is he the guy then who's behind these kind of ridiculous Gibson sort of ridiculous misfires that they've done recently?
Well, I would say that to the extent that he seems to want to be ambitious in the expansion of their product offerings and not just sell Les Pauls and SGs for the rest of his life, then yeah, maybe. And I have played some things that I found questionable as well.
But I think the point is there are lots of companies. There are lots of companies like this that just basically go, "Hey, what about this?" and you got to go, yeah, okay, well, what about this then? And the thing is the way to test them quickly, build a prototype, show it at a show, give it to a couple of reviewers, get some feedback. Now, okay, let's forget it. It's probably cheaper than going through the entire R&D process, getting it straight to market. So, I mean, perhaps that's what's going on there. And that's not a model that is, especially unrealistic. It's just different to what perhaps we're used to, right?
I think he just wants to expand his business beyond SGs and Les Pauls and
around
Hummingbird.
Around the point when opcode started to disappear, there was a massive shift away from everything being in the studio outside the box and connected via the only MIDI connector that really worked on a Mac, to people starting to use software synths. So I suppose that MIDI interface, your multiple MIDI interface market must have dwindled around that point.
Sure, yeah, sure. But they do, I mean, it was their software and OMS, wasn't it? Or was it OMS?
Well, OMS was essential on a Mac. You couldn't use a Mac without OMS. And then,
but it was was kind of free. There wasn't really much of a market for it, I suppose.
No, there was a competing product by Motu called Fastlane.
Oh, that.
Well, I'm just saying, everybody did use pretty much opcode. I had them both, and there were other people doing that kind of business. But I agree with you substantially that at that point the business was changing anyway.
Yeah.
Well, it may be that we're mistaken, that Gibson has been sort of tarred a little bit harshly with just some unfortunate business ventures and coinciding with, acquisitions coinciding with companies just not really, being with the flow of things. So it'd be great to know. It'd be great if this actually did work out. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure how many people there are working. The boffins left at Cakewalk that can kind of add that intellectual kind of oomph that maybe he's after. I mean,
I don't know.
No.
I mean, they've been trying through the Roland, relationship to expand their product. They've been listening to people. When I meet with these guys, even though their software doesn't really do what I want it to do, they're listening very carefully and trying to make it do that. I mean, I found them to be responsive. I know people who swear by their stuff on the PC side. And of course, you can always find people who swear at their stuff as well.
Sure.
But I think my understanding is they're going to run it out of the same office in Boston.
Yeah.
That they're going to basically retain the staff, and they're just trying to broaden their offerings over at Gibson.
Yeah. I think the thing is... Sorry, go, Mark.
I was going to say Cakewalk is a really good piece of software, and Tascam is a name I trust. So if you put those two things together, I'll look at it, definitely, because it sort of makes sense to put,
It'd be good. I mean, Tascam haven't really, in the last couple of years or few years, haven't seen an awful lot of exciting products from them. They've kind of stuck to the sort of fairly, flavors of audio interfaces and the occasional recorder. They haven't sort of brought out anything.
They've been really looking
but they always make really rugged, really professional stuff that works, which has a simplicity about it that makes, and it's a home recording brand that makes that you feel like it's it's going to happen for you if you plug that stuff in, right?
Right. Okay.
It doesn't feel like. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say the thing about the about X2 and Sonar, Cakewalk, where Cakewalk currently is at. There's been this thing where it's very much about multi-touch on a laptop. And I've got a multi-touch laptop downstairs with the latest version of Sonar installed on it, and just playing around with a multi-touch interface, but with like a DAW, a computer-based DAW is a very potent combo, and they kind of first off the marks with that. And I know that the upcoming stuff along that line is going to be more is developing that further. Now, that's what intrigues me about this current acquisition in a way, because it's
bringing all that know-how in-house, I suppose, isn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, this whole touch thing, I wonder if Gibson are kind of drawn to that as well, because maybe that might be more appealing to their guitar market, possibly, a more hands-on approach, and to sort of to align themselves with that kind of thing. Just rumination.
No,
really.
that's a very interesting point. I mean, I think that when I've spoken to Jimmy Landry, who's the product specialist, I was speaking to him the other day, he was saying that the thing about the multi-touch system is rather than going for the I want to do everything with a touchscreen, when you combine it with your mouse and the other key commands, it just speeds up workflow because of the way you can kind of swipe across the screen, get to objects quickly, and then do that, and then get a bit more kind of detailed with your usual inputs, so you're not just sort of standing there like a zombie like this trying to reach the screen all the time. It's a question of incorporating. They're being certainly a little smarter about it and not so absolutist when it comes to using touchscreens, and that's probably going to be an approach that ultimately will pay off. But the problem is that all the major doors are now multi-platform, pretty much apart from that. I mean, I'm sure there are other examples, but in terms of the sort of big players, it seems like they're the last to jump, and I don't know if there are any plans to do that, and that may or may not be an issue for them, and certainly they should maybe consider going to Linux, I would have thought.
It's interesting that with Cakewalk has always had a very PC kind of feel to it, the way the menus open and just everything.
Yeah.
It really has always felt very PC centric. So I wonder if that may be something to do with that.
Well, you could do that on Linux too. I mean, it is possible.
There's money in Linux?
I think there is going to be. Yeah, I think there really is going to be, because it will not require you to upgrade your hardware to the latest. You can still get a fairly decent performance out of an operating system that can run on an old machine. I mean, I'm doing that here all the time. It's and I literally the guys on Bitwig saw that I was wearing a Bitwig T-shirt on one of the podcasts for review and said, "Hey, do you want a beta of Bitwig?" And it's like, hell yeah, I do. Yeah, I really do. I want to see how that works because I want to bung it on a Linux machine and see how it performs. Definitely.
No, understood. I'm talking from the corporate standpoint of justifying the R&D and the amount of money it's going to cost to write that thing over again for a new platform.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, everybody else has done it, and they've already absorbed that cost. The problem is that
everybody else is writing their DAWs for Linux?
Not everybody else, but everybody else is writing their platform, is multi-platform. Maybe not Linux, but Mac and PC at least.
Right, no, I understand that. Motu is Mac only, and those guys, and so's Logic, and Cakewalk is PC only, and so's Acid. And there actually are as many who are not.
I suppose, yeah. No, that's a fair point.
There's a very interesting points going on in the chat room though about the forthcoming Steam box. Valve, the software.
That's
company.
a media center kind of thing, right?
Yeah, but look at that though. So on Impulse is saying Cakewalk is already on Steam. So in terms of a money distribution, this is.
Wow.
Because you can just buy your software through Steam, can't you? It's a little bit like the App Store, really, isn't it? I suppose the closest thing to. Yeah, well, it's more than that. It's all the multiplayer.
Yeah, no, I'm sure.
Is Steam like a thing a little bit like Ubuntu?
I think
it's like an OS that is a kernel on kernel. Is that the right word? On top of Linux.
Kernel Parker.
Well, Steam has been running in Windows and stuff, hasn't it? Anyway, it's been running as just. As like a game client.
I don't know what Steam
Windows.
Is. I know what Ubuntu is.
Steam is, as far as I know, is an operating system that's designed to run on your telly or in a device that is small enough just to stick near your telly. It's a very small footprint, and primarily it's being aimed at the gaming market and little sort of apps and being able to kind of watch YouTube and stuff and media center stuff. But it may well be have other. Sorry, Rich.
I want to know if it's the same Steam that Persing uses in his Omnisphere engine.
No.
Oh.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Am I sure? I think so. Yeah.
Can I have that right, Gaz?
It's a coincidence. I think it's a
no. I had somebody tell me it was. That's why.
Okay.
Well, if that's the case, then, wow.
It may be. I think we'd need clarity before we would say yes or yay or no.
Get Persing on the phone.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, if he's been watching the live stream, he's probably gone home before we actually got the show together, as I wouldn't blame him. But hello, Eric, if you do ever watch this particular show, yes, it would be nice to know. I don't think it is either, but it's just maybe just an accident of naming. In fact, Howard Scar chat room says, no, it's a different Steam. I mean, it's not the same. Yeah, so I'd say we're fairly... oops, that's you. There we go. I'd say we're fairly kind of sure that it's perhaps not. But yeah. I've forgotten where I was because I was thinking about all of those technical issues that I had to resolve just to get the show on, and it's already clouded my mind. God, it's amazing how powerful that awful sensation was. But it seems to be working now. How's everything holding up for everybody? We've got, yep, you look fabulous, Gaz. I think, you know what? I think what must have been the issue with your video in the past was this multiple Skype thing and maybe the CPU not being able to handle all of those video streams, because Rich looks great, Mark looks great, Gaz looks great, I look HD. And need a shave. But yeah, I think it's all working. So thanks for.
You're very handsome, Nick. I think you look absolutely fine.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you, Mark. You haven't been editing the same footage that I have today, which doesn't agree with that point of view. I'm afraid.
Nick, been playing with Omnisphere with the CME. The CME Xkey, because Omnisphere has got really cool polyphonic aftertouch support, so it's actually and the way you can kind of set that up in the modulation matrix is just really cool. So I highly recommend that that's a little polyphonic aftertouch keyboard.
Yeah, well, we were talking about maybe getting two of them together, and so you get multiple octaves. That's
been doing it, but also been doing it with different sounds on Omnisphere as well. So you've got two keyboards, one on one hand, one on the other, and with the polyphonic aftertouch is mucho loveliness, actually.
Ah, excellent. You managed to get the gain settings right, so it works for you.
Yeah, I've set the delay, the polyphonic aftertouch delay to be the maximum, so it doesn't start to aftertouch until,
Until a bit later on. Oh, okay.
A little bit later on. I mean, yes, there's an app, you see, that comes on the iPad that you can configure various things like the velocity curves. In fact, you can draw the velocity curves in with your finger on the iPad, which I think... don't know that many people would want that, but it's interesting that it's there.
Ah, that's correct. We did look at that in the last but one Sonic Touch, actually, and we were impressed with and I think it must be shipping now or getting close to it. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's it's actually very nice. It's got these flat keys, but they are kind of full size or more or less full size.
With so little profile. Yeah, there's just not. If you hold it up thin wise, Rich, you can see that. That's how thin they are. They're really.
Oh my God.
But they've got really polyphonic aftertouch. It's bonkers.
And I have to say, I mentioned this in the Sonic Touch, but there's a little curve at the end of the keys there.
Yeah.
So therefore, it just lips over your desktop. It lips over the edge of your desktop, and it just anchors it there. It's really nice. As opposed to just
triangulation will stop you from snapping it, won't it? Because if it didn't have that triangular edge on it, then it would be really flexible. So that's where it's going to gain its strength.
Oh,
I've just got to make you full screen, Mark.
While we're showing off gear, can I show you the reason why nearly every wire in my studio has had to be unplugged and put away?
Yes, please do. Please do.
Okay. He's puppy phonic. Let me find him. Hang on. Come on.
Oh,
oh, your little puppy.
Look at that.
He's puppy phonic.
Oh, wow.
He's called George, and he's puppy phonic.
He's so cute,
isn't he?
He's gorgeous.
You're very stinky, aren't you, George? Very stinky, and he's about 8 weeks old. Just over 8 weeks old.
Wow.
And it's an absolute nightmare, because every time he wakes up, he chews everything. You absolutely, lots of pools of pee. The moment he wakes up, it's just like I absolutely cannot stop and do it. I tried to make a cup of coffee this morning and ended up burning 3 rounds of toast and setting the smoke alarm off and everything.
Wow, brilliant. That's it's nice to have a bit of cute puppies in there. So are we going to be expecting to see a lot of videos of your cat playing the keyboard, your puppy playing musical instruments and what have you on YouTube soon? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I mean, he's small at the moment, but he's going to be a bloody great, massive dog because he's a golden retriever, and his mum was big. So,
wow.
I don't know that his paws would get in between the keys. He'll have to play Moog Taurus bass pedals or something, won't he?
That's that sounds like excellent. Well, surprisingly, even though I've been we've not followed any sort of agenda really, and it's just been kind of very thankfully held together by the efforts of my guests, we seem to have reached to a point in the show which feels like, because I have to sign off fairly soon. But that's awesome. I can't believe that we've done. I can't believe we've actually made it this far. I want to thank you so much for that. You'll be able to, actually, there's somebody said in the chat room there, you'll be able to lay Andrex all over the floor and do Andrex puppy ads. Maybe you should send you should send something into whatever the latest clip show is. You could do lots of spoofs and circuit bent versions of the Andrex toilet tissue advert.
I mean, I'll have to get on with that quick because he's growing at an incredible rate. He's like, I don't know, it's scaring me. I've never had a dog before, and I don't know what to do with them, and I'm just kind of like going, oh my God.
Why did you get one?
East wanted one.
Ah, fair enough.
And I think Gina and East had like some kind of an agreement that if we moved to Glastonbury, he could have a puppy.
Right.
Oh my God. It makes child rearing look unbelievably easy. I mean, in that he's in everything. Absolutely in everything. At least babies can't get up and run around and chew things.
Yeah, don't give them the log on to any of your electronic devices, eh?
Yeah, right.
Or teach him to program.
Passwords to the bank account.
Awesome. There were other subjects, but I'm so woefully underprepared for them that I'm sort of averse to maybe exposing my ineptitude even further than it already has been.
10 most relevant synths in the history of man.
That was pretty cool. That
was a great topic. Let's do it next week.
Should we do it next week? Is that okay with everybody?
I think Dave Spears should be on that one.
I think, and hopefully by next week I can complicate matters even more by adding another computer. But it does mean that we can have 4 remote guests. That's because if you see over there, there's my switcher, which has got 4 screens used up, 5 screens when I play a video, which you won't see. And there's 1 slot left for another computer, so it means I can get 4.
I quite like this, actually, the way you've done it now, because I was terrified of going, oh, yes, in the middle of somebody else saying something. So it feels a little bit more interactive without me having to cause the video to switch by agreeing with somebody and going, ah.
Yeah, I mean,
I just was terrified of making any sound at all when someone else was speaking, apart from talking over them, of course, but that's another trait entirely.
Yeah, it does seem to work better in a lot of ways, and it does. I keep saying it looks just so much more hi-fi. Is that hand sonic you got there, Gaz? See, I can even tell what you've got in the, and that's taking up a tiny microscopic portion of your room.
That's in one of the creative zones, so and that goes through a whole bunch of effects. So that's quite cool.
There's a new version of the hand sonic out, apparently.
I've seen it. Looks quite nice, but actually, it doesn't look quite as configurable as this old one. This one's cool. It's got the ribbon controllers on it as well. So I
remember I spent an awfully long time configuring it in Logic to kind of map to various things before realizing that those mappings were saved per document. So when I opened a new song, I had to do it all over again.
Oh, yeah, which not good.
I really, I'm not down with that kind of stuff anymore. Life's too short.
Have you ever come across V Hart? This a woman who posts things on YouTube. She's just stumbled upon her video about 12 tones.
Is that is that Hart as in ART or HERT?
VIHART. Yes, it's a mad woman, amazing genius woman, and she makes these little videos. But she made a video about 12 tones.
One of those days where you wake up thinking.
Sorry, yeah. Okay, I'm seeing 12 tones. I'm going to get there. Look, I can do this.
She renders.
It's just one of those
nursery
days where you
rhymes
wake up
into
thinking
12. She makes 12-tone music.
It'd be awesome.
If you jump to the end, she does Twinkle Twinkle Little Star in 12-tone.
Wow.
This is quite possibly. It's about half an hour long. It's quite possibly the most astonishing video I've ever seen.
Ooh, that's quite beautiful, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah, watch the video. It's astonishing.
Oh, we'll have to check that out. Thanks, Gaz. That's a top tip. Her name is Vi Hart. Let's see if I go
She does all
to...
sorts of videos about mathematics, and it's not just like music, but she's
Oh, that sounds
definitely
great.
a polymath.
I
think,
love all
yeah.
that stuff.
A good
She
fight.
made my eyes go funny with that little bit just there. I thought some water was going to come out for a moment.
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
gone all
absolutely.
weird.
It's amazing. It's amazing. She's amazing. She's my new hero.
Well, thank you. We'll check that out. And there are some other topics we could talk about next week that we didn't. Of course, Microsoft Surface 2 came out, and also there's something that Azia had sent me just before the show, which meant obviously it was never going to get into it. Ordinarily it would, but it was just this whole thing about tuning 432 hertz to 440 and the difference in tuning and all that. It's just a fantastic set of conspiracy theories and all sorts of theories there. So maybe we'll talk about that next week if we get the opportunity, assuming the show works. I think it will. It feels like we've reached a level of stability because it sort of does seem to be happening. And you're right, Rich, about getting an intern. It would be great. But unfortunately, having an intern for one afternoon a week is quite a difficult thing to organise. But I'll see what
I didn't say that, but it's a great idea.
Oh, didn't you? Oh, I thought I saw something
Not
in the
this
chat room.
time. I've said it in the past.
Okay.
Somebody in the chat room said it this time.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. That would be awesome. But yeah, until I've got this system working and nailed, it's sort of one of those. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky to organise because if the system keeps changing, then the person will never learn how it works because I'm having trouble to figure it out myself. But I must say this new switcher software really is much, much faster and more responsive, which I really like. I can play a video and it's there straight away. I love it. There's Rich again. And yes, and we can play the ad and I can run the lower thirds and everything. So, yeah. I suppose we should probably say thank you and goodbye, and I'll come to you, Rich, first because you're chuckling away and it's always good to see a smile on your face. So, Rich, thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure, and thanks for hanging in there, and I'm sorry that it was such a sort of a false start, but hopefully didn't keep you too long from your important work creating hit records at the Nile Rodgers facility. Are you off to Waxahachie now?
Yeah, and I might even go to the studio.
Yeah,
hey! Actually, I'm going to go have lunch with a guy who I've just met from Newtown. So
awesome.
It's good.
Great. Well, glad to hear it. Thanks for joining us, as I say. And also, Mark and your lovely puppy. What's he called? George?
George, yeah.
Well, I'm glad he seemed to keep it together for long enough. You're probably going to have your hands full now. Are you taking him out for walks yet, or is it a bit early?
No, he's not ready for that. He had his first jab yesterday. So,
right, so not yet.
There's another one in 2 weeks, and then he's not allowed out for another week after that. So he's just annihilating the house at the moment.
Okay. Anyway, thanks,
I
Mark.
don't know why he's fallen asleep again, which is a bad sign because it might make. He's also
up all night,
barking all through the bloody night as well. So the neighbours must love us at the moment.
Jesus,
but,
I don't think
we did put a very, very sorry
kennel
note through the door.
Yeah. Soundproof kennel. Anyway, thanks, Mark, and great to have you aboard, and look forward to seeing you next week.
No, you're very welcome.
And Gaz Williams there in high fidelity in your lovely songwriting garret with all your equipment that we can see and your 414 up in front and centre.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us too. It's been great to have you aboard as ever.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
And now I can fade to black. This is going to be really cool because I've got a special button for that. I hope it's going to work. And I can also fade the audio as well. So if I fade to black and fade the audio at the same time, bye, everybody.